Frontiers of Freedom, conservative group dedicated to promoting free markets, limited government, strong national defense. And they've been focusing on sort of an interesting issue involving our fisheries, involving providing fishermen the freedom to fish. And there's a coalition that has been created. It's called the Catch Shares Coalition, an initiative of the Frontiers of Freedom. Let's get more information from our special guest, Travis Korson, who's with us here on the Ringside program. Hey, Travis, how are you? Good morning.
I'm doing well. How are you? Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So tell us about this initiative that your group has started.
Sure. So basically, we are looking to promote catch shares, which are a free market approach to fisheries management. Ever since 1976, the passage of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the federal government has had a form of control over our fisheries. Up until 2006, basically, it was the heavy hand of government on your boat. You know, first they tried to tell you what days you could fish, and that didn't work. And then they tried to tell you how big your boat could be, and that didn't work. So then they tried to tell you the type of equipment you use, and you see where this was going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it got to the point where, despite all these regulations, they still weren't able to regulate the fisheries in a effective way to make the fishermen have a successful haul every season and also preserve the fisheries for future fishermen. So in 2006, the Bush administration, during the reauthorization of Magnuson-Stevens, tried to implement this new system of fisheries management called catch shares. Basically, what catch shares are they apply property rights to fisheries. So instead of, some bureaucrat in Washington being on your boat and putting in all these regulations, they basically started applying property rights to fisheries. So every fisherman, based on historic catches, gets a share, gets a percentage of the take. And the thought is that by using property rights, by using the powers of the free market, it would encourage conservation, because as the health of the fisheries grow, the percentage that these fishermen can take grows. So it's basically taking the free market, taking property rights and applying it to fisheries management in a way to preserve the fisheries and also allow for a more successful haul for the fishermen.
And since 2006, how has it been working?
It's been working quite well. We're currently at a point where 65% of America's fisheries are governed by this system. I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Deadliest Catch before, but if you've ever seen the first season compared to subsequent seasons, you notice the catch gets a lot less deadlier. And that's the nature of the fact where it provided fishermen with the flexibility to go out and fish when the weather was a lot safer. Fishing, up until recently, has been one of the most dangerous occupations in the United States. There was an average annual deaths, 124 deaths per 100,000 for fishermen, as opposed to 4 per 100,000 from the national average. It was almost 31 times more deadly than the national average for jobs. As far as economic effects, red snapper, which I know is of special interest to fishermen on the Gulf, so some New Orleans listeners, the value of the fishery, actually based on quota prices, increased by 82%. And the inflation-adjusted ex-vessel price of red snapper has increased by 17%. So it's been something that has not only made fishing safer for the fishermen, it's been more economically profitable for them as well.
So it's been a big win-win for the industry, for the fishermen. And what's going on now? Are you concerned that this might be threatened by some in Congress, some in the Obama administration?
So basically what's going on is Magnuson-Stevens is up for their reauthorization here in 2012. There are some guesses that, we may go back to a continuing resolution and can keep funding it where there is, but there are some in Congress. Barney Frank was the most recent person to try to prevent funding for expansion of this catch shares program. So what we want to do is we want to get out there, we want to spread the word, educate Americans and other folks to the benefits of this program, and help get that remaining 35% to a point where we can bring them under some sort of a catch share system that'll make things better, again, for the fishery and for the fishermen.
What would it take to make that happen? Is there an initiative in Congress to expand the program?
So the fisheries themselves are actually handled. There are several regional fishery management councils around the country. There's a Gulf Regional Fishery Management Council, which covers obviously New Orleans and many of the other Louisiana, many of the other states along the Gulf. What basically needs to happen is you need the fishermen and the council members to get together and start sitting down and planning out this fishery system, planning out this catch-share system, and working towards implementation. One of the biggest problems that we've been running into is funding. The NOAA receives a lot of money for funding and for catch-shares implementation and for things like that, but instead of taking the funds that are appropriated for it and actually using it on fishery science, they're more interested in taking it and using it on putting satellites up into the sky to try to do climate change science and other things like that. You know, these are the same satellites that when the polar ice caps were actually expanding, these satellites said they were shrinking. So we see how successful their climate change science money is going. So one of the important things to do is make sure that the funding that is set aside for this program with the NOAA is actually spent for catch-shares and for better science for these fisheries.
What can our listeners do, Travis?
I encourage them to visit our website, which is fishingandfreedom.com, where they can learn more about the issue. You can find us on Facebook as well, facebook.com/fishingandfreedom. And I also encourage them to attend some of these Gulf regional regional fishery management council meetings if they have time. They're able to attend and go and basically speak on catch-shares, express some of their interest in there, and work with some of the local fishermen to try to start implementing this in the local Gulf fisheries.
Why are 35% of the fisheries governed by the old command and control system? Why isn't all of the fisheries under this catch-shares initiative?
So basically, again, this is a system that encourages bottom-up instead of top-down. So Washington doesn't have the ability, and this is one of the great things about it, to sit there in their NOAA, sit there in their offices in Washington, D.C., and force this upon the fishermen and the fisheries and everyone else. This is something that needs to come from the regional fishery management councils. Unfortunately, not all of these councils are created equally, and you don't have necessarily the officers in some of these councils that are friendly to this. They're more than happy to stick with the current system because it basically shuts a lot of fishermen out of the fisheries by reducing some of these fishing seasons to a matter of weeks. So one of the things that we certainly need to look at are the officials and the scientists specifically that sit on these regional fishery management councils and see whether or not we can work towards putting folks interested in actually making the fishery sustainable both for the fishermen and environmentally into positions where they can make those decisions.
How many of these councils are there across the country?
I believe there are 7, if I remember correctly. There's kind of a Northwest Pacific. You've got one Southern Pacific, same thing on the Atlantic side, the Gulf, and then I believe there are 1 or 2 others that I'm not that are kind of in some of the outlying colonies and other outlying islands that are still under the United States jurisdiction. But I believe it is 7, and the Gulf, again, is the one that concerns your listeners the most.
Right, and what is the system in place here in our region?
So currently there are currently certain fish, the red snapper is one that I was mentioning, that do fall under this catch-shares program for certain sectors. So there are a couple different ways to split it up. There's recreational fishermen, which we believe should be totally exempt. A father and son goes out on their boat. We don't want any permits. You don't want any catch-shares purchasing. There's charter fishermen, which there's some dispute whether they should be kind of under a catch-share system or under a different system. And then there's the commercial fishermen, which fall under the catch-share system. As I was saying, the red snapper is one of those fishes that falls under the catch-share system in certain vectors. Again, there are certain sections, and there's a state and federal jurisdiction. So there are a lot of different jurisdictions that are out there. But the red snapper, again, is one that does fall under this catch-share system.
Well, Travis, you enlightened us on an important issue. We're going to link to the site. We wish you the best in getting the word out about market-based solutions. And I certainly think it seems to have worked, and I'd like to see it expanded. And I certainly hope we have success with that. It's Communications Director for Frontiers of Freedom, Travis Korson. Website fishandfreedom.com or ff.org to get more information. All right, when we come back, it's the Congressman, Bill